Welcome to Confessions Beyond the Food. I'm your host, Nancy Ridlen. Let's dig in and get inspired. Have you ever heard someone say, if only the training had been better? What if training isn't actually the problem? In this episode of Confessions Beyond the Food, I'm joined by Michael Wolfe, Director of Learning and Development for SEFA. Michael came into the food service industry just 4 years ago after spending most of his career outside of it. That fresh perspective has challenged a lot of the assumptions many of us have about training, leadership, and what it really means to learn. We talk about why experience doesn't always make someone a great teacher, why organizations often misunderstand the role of training, and the habits that separate great learners from everyone else. If you lead a team, train employees, or just simply want to keep growing in your career, I think you'll walk away looking at learning in a completely different way like I did. Let's dig in. Welcome, guys, back to Confessions Beyond the Food. I'm super excited, as always, to have Michael Wolfe. He's the Director of Learning and Development for SEFA. Hey, Michael.
Hi, Nancy, and hi to all of those folks out there in podcast land that we can't see.
Yeah, so let's just jump in. So we got connected just recently through a SEFA webinar through American Metalcraft. So what were you guys doing on that podcast?
Yeah, so we run as part of the offerings that we deliver to our members, part of our training services. We do a series of webinars that are sponsored by our supplier partners for our dealer members. American Metalcraft was one of those. But we have a long-standing partnership with our rep groups, with MOFSI. I believe we've actually sponsored their conference for the past couple of years. So very, very proud of that history. And so we extend an invite outside of our traditional membership to our manufacturer reps and to our rep groups. And so I believe one of your folks was on that webinar. And so that's how this whole journey started.
Well, my partner in crime got off the call and immediately texted me and said, "Hey, I've got your next guest for the podcast."
And here we are, regretting every minute. But yeah.
No, loving every minute. So, and it was funny because when we had our introduction call, before, just to kind of figure out who are you? And
because you didn't know, and you didn't necessarily trust your partner, and kind of like, who did you send me to do this podcast?
Typically of Tracy, she's got eye for good talent. So, and really she was very impressed with how you handled that webinar and just your overall enthusiasm. And honestly, within 3 minutes of our call, I knew that he would be an awesome guest.
Oh boy. I have no idea what happened during those first 3 minutes that made you think this was going to be a good idea, but here we are anyway. So
you are the guy at first impressions. So own it.
Okay. I guess I can. That's fair. But no, I'm glad Tracy made the connection. Glad to be a part of it. So here we are. Tracy made the connection. We're off and running.
So one thing that really stood out in our conversation was that you've only been in food service for about 4 years, which in our industry practically makes you brand new. So tell us about your career before SEFA.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you say that, because I continue to at least try to play the I'm still new card. So you're one of the few people who has allowed me to continue to play that card beyond a year or two. So I appreciate the vote of I'm still relatively new here. I'm a learning guy. And so when people ask what industry do I operate in? Well, during my career as a learning professional, I've industry hopped. Every industry has learning or training or job support or human performance, whatever you want to call it. And so I've spent my career, since we last chatted, I'm like, gosh, I've been doing this a while here. I'm not going to admit how long it's been, but in some way, shape, or form, helping people learn better delivering, designing, training in a whole host of industries. I've worked internally at organizations. I've worked as a consultant outside, helping an organization, build a course or build training. Started in online training, what used, the very beginnings of e-learning, which has become fairly popular these days. But since branched out into all things related to performance improvement, whether it's a course, whether it's a live event, all things related to training, spanning a crazy range of industries, everything from food service now, back to pharmaceuticals, back to even was involved in a project related to teaching kids about fire safety, and I still moonlight actually as a math tutor, so I still connect one-on-one with high schoolers. So when you say what was I doing before SEFA and before food service, I was doing learning. That's what I've done my whole career.
What a great career. And you must be smart if you're a math tutor.
Well, the subject matter, okay, yeah, some of it is things that most parents don't remember anymore and they can't help their kids with. One of my colleagues at SEFA actually is notoriously not great at math. This topic comes up on a semi-regular basis. And just within the past week, I sent her a link. It's some YouTube family that does parodies of songs, and they took the old 80s staple Africa and turned it into algebra. If you haven't heard it, Google it. Funny as heck for many of the folks out there who cannot relate to when their kids have to take math. So I don't know if I don't know if that makes me smart or not. If I know math, it just means I have some whole bunch of neurons that are devoted to remembering stuff that we really don't need that much anymore in real life.
Well, everyone has their gifts. So
I appreciate you calling that a gift. Thank you.
So what attracted you to the food service industry?
It was the polar opposite of what I was doing before. The most recent industry that I operated in, and it takes a second because I say it and people are like, what? So I supported actuarial scientists, and you're like, what's that? Like, what's actuarial science? It is math related, so it resonated with me. But it's math on steroids. So it's very, very high end statistics. What actuaries do, I like to think of it as they put together models of how the world works, primarily to look at risk. So, for example, actuaries are the folks who help insurance companies decide how much to charge for a life insurance premium based on when you have this set of conditions, what is your life expectancy, right? So that's at the core of what actuaries do, but there's so much more than that. But they do like high-end statistical analysis, very ivory tower, heavy academic, very rigorous path to becoming credentialed as an actuary. So you are designated as someone who can officially comment on these kinds of things. And then you juxtapose that with food service, which is as concrete as it gets, right? We provide service, we sell widgets, it's equipment that people use to cook food, and that's what we do. So I think there's a practicality to it. It's well grounded. It's just real. You can touch it, you can feel it, and there's that aspect of it. I found really interesting in contrast to this very kind of esoteric stuff that I was dealing with before food service.
I mean, you're basically on two different planets. You came to a new planet.
It is a whole other world, and it's a lot of fun. There's a lot about it that I like, and so, but that's probably what initially attracted to me to the industry was just how different it was from the world that I was operating in at the time.
So what surprised you the most coming into this industry?
Surprised me the most. Well, I heard coming in, firstly, people talk within SEFA, people talk about the SEFA family. And I thought that was just a phrase. And I also heard this rumor that the industry tends to suck people in. Like once you're in, it's like the Hotel California situation. Like you can check out anytime but you're never leaving. And so I'm like, yeah. No, really. At our at our SEFA events, it is like getting together with old friends. And it's, I don't know if it's, I don't want to say that I was coming in not expecting that, but just people talked about it. And until you experience it, I think it is just kind of words on the page. It really, I don't know if it's that it's a service oriented industry, but there's just a lot of really, really nice people in it. I know that within SEFA in particular, but I don't think it's unique to SEFA as a buying group. Our dealers and the manufacturers that we partner with, just across the industry, it's a lot of good people doing good for the right reasons. And so it's been a lot of fun. I don't want to make it sound like I was thinking that it wasn't going to be that, but just given how talked up it was, I think I was surprised at how real those words actually turned out to be.
Yeah, I think we should do a PSA, out there. Hey, if you're going to get in, be ready to be a lifer.
Yeah, you are. I can see in a very short period of time why it is a place that people come, and it's a destination industry for those folks. They don't leave.
So what has been like being an outsider? Has that been an advantage for you coming in?
As a learning professional, I've made a career about being an outsider. I'd have to think back pretty hard. I don't think I've ever touched the same industry twice. Right. So I've been with an industry for some period of time and then moved. So I've made a career out of coming into an industry and seeing what it has to offer. The good news for me, if this wasn't the case, I would have failed a long, long time ago. Learning is learning across the board. People are people in general. Yes, they vary from what they do and how they do it, but learning tends to behave the same way from industry to industry. So I can take what I've done in a previous industry and apply it. So I think it does give me an advantage. I do get to play the newbie card for at least some period of time. You're telling me I can still play it, which is awesome. So I'm going to keep doing it. And if anybody asks, no, you've been in here over 4 years, you're no longer a newbie. I'm like, well, Nancy said I'm still a newbie, relatively speaking. So I'm going to keep doing it. I'm allowed to, I think it gives me some leeway in asking kind of naive, ignorant questions. And by asking those, I'm able to hopefully figure things out that I can use to then make the training and the learning that I do better. Just being a novice, it gives me a perspective that I feel like maybe resonates with a lot of the audience who I'm trying to train on things or build training for, in comparison to a lot of the industry are, because of the lifers, right? There's a lot of experienced folks, but those experienced folks are different from, in general, the audience that I'm trying to reach, which is someone who's an up and comer learning a lot about the industry. Not that we don't train the experts too, but it tends to be the more new folks who we target. And those folks can be very different than the majority of the industry that tends to have a lot more experience than they do.
Yeah. And one thing we talked about is that many people that are responsible for training right now in our industry have decades of experience.
Well, that tends to be the case, right? I mean, that tends to be true because the people, and in our industry, right, there's turnover happening, right? There are folks who are retiring, aging out, whatever you like to call it. Hopefully I just didn't get censored for something, but you have those folks. They tend to be your most natural choice for the folks. Well, they are the people who need to be onboarding the new people, right? They are the mentorship. They are bringing those people forward. And yet the more experienced you get, it becomes harder and harder to remember what it was like to be new to the industry. And so it becomes harder and harder to actually, in many cases, be an effective trainer. And so it's ironic, right? The people who know the most are sometimes the ones who are challenged the most to continue to be a good trainer and facilitator of learning, given how much they know. It is a little bit weird. You'd want those people to be in the best position to train, and sometimes they aren't.
Yeah, I definitely experienced that myself, coming into the industry and seeing so many newbies coming in and training them. And it is challenging when you've been in this industry for 20 years and you just throw out all these words, of different, just the product knowledge, and also, the sales side and the end user side, buying groups. Like, there's so much to learn, and it is hard to break it down and then, remember that they don't know, all the terms that, are unique to the food service industry.
It's as an expert, it's a natural thing. I feel like experts do it because they want the newer folks to benefit from their expertise, and they want the newer folks to be able to learn it faster, to get better faster. So the desire is to convey all that they know to these new folks, because they're in the hopes that whatever process it was that the experts went through to become an expert, which took them 20 years, by the way, they want to take those 20 years and compress them down into like a 3-day boot camp. Like it's just not going to happen. Experts didn't get to where they are in some kind of compressed period. They became experts over a period of time. So when you're thinking about developing someone who's newer, remember, it's going to take them a while too. There's no magic bullet. So as a trainer, it's this mentality of, wait, I got to remember, I can't boil the ocean. They're not going to learn it all at once. The school, we all went to the school of hard knocks in terms of learning from our mistakes. That's how the newer folks are going to do it too. And so as educators, as people who create learning for the next generation, let's just remember sometimes there just isn't any easier way, and that's okay. So we just want to facilitate that process as opposed to trying to short circuit it. And by doing that, we overwhelm the new person with all of our knowledge and experience that it's going to take them 20 years too to become the expert of 20 years. There's no way around it.
Yeah, I am super blessed. I mean, in my career, because I did get ongoing product training, because there's hundreds of thousands of products that, you can sell. And then, but also, I think it is hard because I think some people bring people in for a week, and do training, and then they go. And when that happened to me in my first job, I had 3 weeks of training, and they said, you're going to remember 30% of this. And so, and I was like,
where the hell did they come up with that number? Like, why
I don't know.
Like, well, which begs the question, you were there for, that's 15 days, right? So
yes.
You're going to remember a couple days worth of it. Like you're going to remember what were you doing the rest of the time, and why were you doing it? Like, I'm sorry, I interrupted your story. You're going to remember 30%. I'm like, who came up with that number, and what was the other 70% involved, and what were you doing with all of that time? Just begs the question.
Yeah. And that's why it does need to be thought out, when you're bringing somebody in. So you mentioned that training is kind of like a hidden stepchild in organizations. So what did you mean by that?
I think you said that to me, that sometimes training gets the bad rap, or that training gets forgotten, right? Even look at the experience you just conveyed, right? The expectation is somehow we're going to train this person for 3 weeks. They're only going to remember 30% of it for whatever reason. And then we're going to send them off into the wild. And I don't know what they're prepared to do or not do. In my experience, sometimes it's even the opposite. But part of it is that there's this expectation that folks are going to somehow magically learn to do their job without thinking about how it is that they're learning, right? Experts became experts after all. And that generation of experts tended to do a lot on their own, right? So they were thrown out there, and they figured it out. It's not a bad way to do it. It's just can be a little bit haphazard, and you don't always know what you're going to get, and leaving people to their own devices can be a little bit risky. But then when push comes to shove, you have these people who are, say, in sales, who are doing really well. And so you want them to keep selling more, right? It's the bottom line that ultimately is important to the business. And so then when the time comes to decide how should people be spending their time, the answer is selling, not learning how to sell, or it's doing their job, not learning how to do their job. So when times are tight, or when time is limited, for some reason, it's pretty obvious. Training tends to be one of the first things that we shortcut. Like, well, we need them doing more that impacts the business, at least impacts the business directly. And so, training, amongst other things that feel like, well, we can put that aside for a while. We somehow survived without it, or so we think. So let's not do that. And so that's the first thing that we think of when, what can we get away with when we need to figure out how to streamline something. For some reason, training gets the short shift.
Before we get back to the episode, if you're looking for new ideas or products for your next project, check out the W3 Shop. Think of it as your online shopping experience for everything but the food. Browse thousands of products from the manufacturers we represent at w3salesonline.com. Now, back to the show. Yeah, and I think that there's also so many shortcuts. I mean, where they don't have to learn what they're doing and the meaning behind it. For example, like auto quotes. People would say, "Hey, Nancy, train this rep on auto quotes." And I said, well, do they even understand like the pricing model and how it works? And they're like, no, it's fine. Just put them on auto quotes and train them. And so
get them from point A to point B, where point B is making money for the business. Get them there as fast as you can. All other things aside, just get them there. Get them to a point where they can use the tool. And that feels like such a weird, like, what does that even mean? Like, what does it mean? Like, teach them how to use auto quotes. Well, what do you mean by that? And what does it, that's where the problem begins. Someone says they need to be able to use auto quotes. Well, can we break that down a little bit in terms of, well, what does expert performance in auto quotes look like? What does someone who's been using auto quotes for a week, what does that look like? And how do they get from that to some improved ability to use auto quotes? If we actually had a conversation about that, then even if we don't like build them training, listen, I'm a learning guy. It doesn't mean that everything needs to be trained. There's a lot of stuff you can learn on the job, and figure it out along the way. So, but at least we could come up with some activities they could be doing in auto quotes where they could then, in some kind of systematic way, gain that experience in auto quotes so that they advance from being a 1 week user of auto quotes to a 1 decade user of auto quotes. And they've built up this knowledge in some way where we're confident that they actually now can do auto quotes better than they could before, whatever that means.
I even take it back even a step further. I mean, before, and really just sit down and explain discount structure and, how people get their discounts and, you get into buying groups. So there's lots of different facets, like, to the reasoning behind it. And if you just get in there and click, I mean, without understanding what you're doing, I think that when you first started the industry, I think it would be confusing.
It worked. It actually, listen, you don't need to understand physics to be able to drive a car. I understand when you hit the brake, things happen, and there's some complicated reasoning as to how that stops the car. We all have functioned perfectly fine in our worlds without understanding the deep science behind how all of that works. So I'm sure that there's stuff in auto quotes that, listen, you don't need some complicated theory about how the food service market works to be able to function in auto quotes. So there's absolutely a benefit. There's the practical side of it. And then there are some things that it works until it doesn't. So you're actually clicking along because you know where to click and how to click. But then something either goes wrong, or there's something a little different, or there's an exception, or there's something you want to get it to do that it doesn't quite do the way you want it to. Now, all of a sudden, you need a little bit deeper understanding of how things work in order to get it to behave the way you want it to. So listen, I'll be the first to stand up, even though I'm a learning professional. Training is not always the answer. Deep philosophical conceptual understanding is not always the answer. You don't always need it. You just sometimes do. And usually the beginners don't need all that in-depth knowledge. They need bits and pieces of it to function. This goes right back to the expert saying, well, I've built up all this knowledge over 20 years. I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to lay it all out for a beginner. oh Lord, please don't do that, right? You gained it over 20 years. Why do you think that the new person can gain it faster than you did? Back off, let them learn it kind of naturally, step by step. They'll build it up over time. And that'll be a better experience for them. It'll be more rewarding for them. They'll feel like they're actually progressing and gaining ground. So it's, yeah, a little bit of theory can go a long way, but it's not always about that. And there isn't always a reason to lay it out like from the ground up. Let them, it's a tool. Yeah, you click in it, learn to click, and we'll build up some of the more complicated stuff as you actually understand what the tool does and how the industry works.
Right. So maybe just something a little more basic, like list price, net price, discount.
Something that they have, something that they have. Listen, we've all eaten at restaurants. That doesn't make us experts in the food service industry, but we all have touched it in some way, shape, or form. So start with something they've seen and something that they can relate to, and then maybe that'll help them kind of hook on to what exactly AQ is trying to do, and then how to do stuff in AQ to actually function in their job.
No, this is great advice. And I'm glad we kind of got to go through an auto quotes exercise on training. Sorry.
No, it's now that, hey, as I said, the only way to, we as an industry talk about auto quotes. So if we want to talk about learning, let's talk about learning auto quotes. Let's talk about learning something concrete. And then that'll hopefully makes it a little bit more relatable than learning something, just learning in general or training in general, learning in the abstract or trying to teach actuaries high-end statistics. That's not going to resonate with this group. That's for sure.
So let's flip the conversation. So instead of us talking about training and the trainer, what makes somebody a great learner?
Well, that's interesting. Well, right. So let's continue along the AQ journey, right? So we were talking about what are some things that the coach can do to guide somebody to become a better user of AQ. No matter what the trainer or the coach or the facilitator, the mentor, whatever they do, in the end, it comes down to what the user, what their person, if they're the mentor, I guess the mentee, whatever their person is absorbing from that and what they're taking away from it, right? No matter what we do as a trainer, we can't learn it for the learner. It's ultimately on them. So what can they do no matter what they're being hit with, right? We live in a world that is full of information, full of learning opportunities. How do good learners do it? That's a really good question. There's one thing that I think good learners do that separates them, which is that they're always thinking about what they're hearing, what they're seeing, what they're doing, and how they can apply it in the future, right? So they hear something, they don't take it for granted. Like it's a piece of information, like, hey, that's all well and good, but how does this help me do my job? Like, where does that fit into my world? Like, when would I use that? And by doing that, they're going through a process that is helping them remember it for the future. How many times I don't know if you've said it, Nancy, or you hear other people say it, you'll tell somebody how to do something and they'll say, that makes sense. And to me, that is a death knell. Like, that makes sense. Well, of course it makes sense. I'm the expert and I explained it in a way that should make sense. Of course it makes sense. I don't care if it makes sense. So a week from now, when I'm not sitting here, are you going to be able to actually do it without me guiding you? That's the question. And a good learner has taken what you've said and they're trying to rehearse it. They're trying to practice it. They'll take it and they'll try steps on their own. They'll come back and ask you questions. Well, of course it makes sense. It always feels like it makes sense. And then you go try to do it on your own. You're like, wait a second. What did they say? What do I do on this screen? How do they do that? I don't know if you or our listeners have gone through that experience. I do. Like, somebody tells me how to do it. I'm like, yep, got it. And then a day later, I'm like, I don't got it. Like it seemed like it made sense. And that's kind of a natural reaction. Like, yeah, it all makes sense when the experts said it. Fantastic. That doesn't do us any good though. So the good learners, I think, take it one step further and they're always trying to sort of apply it and think about what it means to them to make it personal, no matter what the trainer was doing. So, good trainer, bad trainer, a trainer who's dumping it onto them. good learners they'll take more notes, they'll make sense of it, and they'll do that with intent, right? They'll practice with intent, they'll think about it with intent, so that they can then use that knowledge later, independently from whatever it was that the trainer was doing.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like watching a YouTube video on how to do something, and then you try to do it. And even for me, a minute later, I'm like, what? And what?
Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense when I'm watching it, but when I try to do it, and
it's unfortunate because it's not like it did make sense. It's not like you're lying to yourself. Like, did it make sense? Yep, made perfect sense. That doesn't mean you can actually then go do it yourself. It just means it looks like it made sense. And it really is a natural reaction to say, yep, makes sense. And then only to discover, sometimes even minutes later, that made less sense than I thought that it felt like it did. It's just this natural, it's got this kind of coherence to it. Yeah, that makes sense. I could do, no, you can't. Turns out you can't. And so even just recognizing that, like, things that sound like they make sense, that doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to remember them later or that I can do them later. So what do I do to actually help myself? Even just recognizing that's a step forward. Like, okay, just because it sounded good doesn't mean I'm going to be able to actually apply it later. Let me actually think a little bit harder about this so that I can apply it later.
Yeah, active listening. And I think I think this is really good for people to hear, that this is a shared responsibility between trainer and trainee. So
there's no way around it. There's no way around it.
Right. I love that. And just being able to, for the learner to say, okay, stop. So in my situation, this happened to me, so this is what I would do. And for them to start thinking in terms of that, would that be the?
Yeah. Like, or it's something, you're whether it's AQ or you have a product trainer who's listing out some features and benefits of a particular product. Okay, how do those features and benefits help my end user? How would I as a dealer bring that up in a conversation? What targets do I have right now where that feature would solve their problem? And now you're actually starting to build up. Note, next time I talk to this particular end user or this particular target, make sure I ask them this, or make sure I bring this up, or make sure I listen for this, because I have something that I think could help. Heck, don't depend on your memory. Whatever your conversation file is, and the next time you have the thing you're going to look at the next time you have a conversation with that target, you put it there so you remember it. So you remember to bring it up, because we got 1,000 things going on. You think you're going to remember it, and then you don't. Put it somewhere where it can remind yourself. Yeah, you said active listening. It's listening and then actively processing. It's actively thinking ahead so that you reinforce what it is that you've heard in your own head, whether or not the trainer is helping you do that.
Right. I mean, because when the first time you hear it, it's going to mean something totally different once you go practice it and get out in the field and then come back and then hear it again. I love it when you get training, like initial training, like here's an overview. I'm not going to get too in the weeds here, and then now go practice it. And then that's how we do it at W3. And then we bring them back, and then we give them more product training on that specific item or concept or selling concept or whatever we're doing. So. And
of course, that's of course really hard to do as the expert, because you know a lot about that product. So everything in your instinct wants to keep talking, wants to keep laying stuff on them. That is going to be so overwhelming, right? So a little bit of a drip feed and then come back. You come back, you ask them, okay, what do you remember from last time? Have they even used it? Because we all know, right? If I tell you something once, or even if we have a conversation, the odds of you remembering it if you didn't apply it since then, those go down pretty fast. And so, okay, have you thought about this since the last time we chatted? That goes a long way to getting them to like dredge up what it is that conversation was the first time, and then have another conversation and another conversation and another conversation, and it builds over time. There is no magic bullet here. It's just it takes people time to learn, just like it took you time to learn. But how quickly we forget how long that took.
Yeah. I mean, these are really great tips. So actually, I have like all these other questions I want and parts of our conversation I wanted to get into, but so I'd love to table the conversation and come back in another podcast to talk about how to create a learning culture within your organization. Would you be down for that?
Wait, put me on the spot here. Like, so in front of the audience, would you be willing to come back to talk about more? I'm guessing you could probably convince me to come back and have a follow-up conversation. Given if the time,
I mean, you guys heard it.
I was going to say, can people comment on these things? Like, I'm gonna put it on the audience to say, did we think that was a worthwhile conversation? Should he come back, or is like, okay, that was 45 minutes of my life I'm never going to get back. Please, for the love of God, let's not continue that conversation with him. So I'm going to leave it to the audience to decide.
I mean, I'm an active learner here. I mean, so
fair.
I mean,
there you go.
This is great. So I can't let you go before I get a confession. So what is your confession for us today?
Well, there's a lot of funny stories and a lot of weird experiences I've been through, but I think the funny one, and that maybe if we do this again, maybe we can do some of the random stuff about like where my dog was bred and things like that.
There's the cliffhanger. But we've been talking about active learners and people who engage in training. Confession: I am a horrible participant at training. Horrible. I know, shocker, right? Well, I have this notorious problem. I'm a learning professional. And so when I go to a training, when I am an attendee at a training, I don't make it a nightmare for the trainer. I empathize with the person who's trying to keep the cats herded. So I don't make it hard on them. But in terms of all of these skills that good learners have, I have a really hard time focusing at training events and learning, because I can't take off my professional hat of being someone who designs and develops and delivers training. So instead of actually focusing on the content, what am I doing? I'm sitting there thinking about, well, I wouldn't have done it that way. I wouldn't have kicked it off that way. I would have put in this activity here. I would have done a break at a different time. No, don't ask that question. I would have followed. So I'm sitting there re-architecting what the training is, as opposed to actually engaging in the training. I've gotten better over time. I have come up with various tricks to prevent myself from going there. But historically, I'm sitting here preaching about being a more active learner. And if you ask me, so are you an active learner? I'm like, no, I'm not. So I think I have work to do for myself too on this front, but I admit it openly. It's given the field I operate in, it is a massive problem for me when I am a learner, and I have to find different ways to make sure that I'm doing what I need to do to actually learn, as opposed to do all the other things that my brain wants to do while I'm in a training. Well, so if anybody sees or hears Michael in the crowd, no, he is judging you.
Okay, no, I didn't say it that way, but I guess to be fair, that I think you. I wouldn't. Don't take it personally. It's just when I'm judgy in that regard. Come on. I think it's to all those food service people in the audience, which I think is probably everybody, right? How often, I understand we eat at restaurants and we enjoy them, but what's the first thing that food service folks do when they sit down at a restaurant, right? They flip over the plate. And now I have not yet, guilty as charged, right? I haven't done that yet, but I do peek over, when there's front of house operations, I'm peeking over, looking at the cook line. I'm already doing it. So let's talking about being judgy here. I mean, it's food service folks enjoying a meal. That's kind of like my problem in a training. So I hope you can empathize, but yes, feel free to give me crap about it.
No, I was just playing, and I think it's good to be self-aware, and I'm glad that it's really cool to have people out there that are so passionate about training and learning and can be able to break this down. And I think so even if you're outside food service and your organization is struggling, you guys could reach out, maybe to Michael on the side, and in contracted services potentially. But I think this has been a really good conversation, and one that our industry really needs, because there's a lot of people that have been in the industry for a long time, not as many newer people coming in. So, and we, as people are aging out, like we talked about, we need good training, and we need to understand this. So I'm excited. Hopefully, potentially, if Michael will have us for the next episode. So,
well, listen, SEFA as a buying group, when I came into SEFA from outside the industry, my job, SEFA is, I think I'll have to ask the audience, but part of SEFA's reputation is what it does for its dealers in the training and marketing space. And so when I came in, my job one was to just not damage the brand that SEFA had literally spent decades building when it came to training. So yeah, the fact that I have a passion for training, and I'm with a buying group that has that same passion, not surprising at all. So if SEFA hears this, and hopefully I haven't stepped on too many toes along the way, or said something that misrepresents the brand, we'll have to see if that follow-up conversation happens. To be continued.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Michael. You've been so fun. I really enjoyed getting to know you. So
same. It's been a blast, and we'll see if there's a sequel that hopefully doesn't disappoint.
All right. Thanks, Michael.
Thank you, Nancy.
For more inspiration, follow our social media at W3 Sales. Please like, comment, and subscribe. All the things. We would love to connect with you.